The Young and the Restless spoilers shock. Michael had always been known as a force to be reckoned with, a man of iron will and unwavering determination. From the moment he accepted the assignment from Victor, Michael was invigorated by the trust placed in him. There was an almost palpable thrill in carrying out a mission that promised glory and retribution against his enemies. But behind the veneer of excitement, a dark trap was being laid. Victor, the enigmatic mastermind, had a reputation for playing puppet master, orchestrating events from the shadows. Michael had always admired Victor's strategic brilliance, never doubting his mentor's judgment. In his mind, being chosen for this assignment was a validation of his strength and loyalty. However, as events began to unfold, Michael soon discovered that his belief in Victor's guidance was being exploited. The very trust that fueled his ambition was the bait in a trap too cunning to escape. The assignment came with promises of settling scores with powerful adversaries. Michael was tasked with actions that would pit him against both Aristotle and Martin, two figures whose influence stretched far and wide. Aristotle was a cunning strategist with an extensive network of allies and hidden enemies, while Martin, equally formidable, had long been a thorn in the side of anyone daring to challenge the established order. Michael's confrontations with them were expected to cement his reputation as a relentless warrior. Yet, every move he made was under the careful orchestration of Victor's unseen hand. Lauren, a close confidant who had always been a beacon of caution and insight, had warned Michael from the beginning. She sensed that something was off about the assignment and that the excitement he felt was a smokescreen masking a deeper betrayal. "Michael, be careful," she had urged him. "This isn't just another mission, there's more to this than meets the eye." But Michael, fueled by his own pride and blinded by his trust in Victor, dismissed her concerns as mere paranoia. His ambition and loyalty left him deaf to her warnings, until the moment of reckoning arrived. In the midst of executing the mission, things took an unexpected and horrifying turn. Michael's relentless pursuit of the past, his investigations into the shadowy dealings of Aristotle and the underhanded operations led by Martin, began to stir up dangerous forces. It seemed that every piece of evidence he uncovered only deepened the labyrinth of deceit he was entangled in. Unbeknownst to him, his probing had rattled the very foundations of a delicate balance of power. His actions had not gone unnoticed, and soon, the consequences of his curiosity began to manifest. Damian, a man known for his volatile temper and unwavering sense of duty to protect his boss Aristotle, became the instrument of retribution. The more Michael delved into the past, into the secrets that could unravel alliances and expose vulnerabilities, the more aggravated Damian became. Consumed by anger and a need to silence any threat to their clandestine operations, Damian decided that decisive action was necessary. His mission was clear. Michael had to pay a steep price for meddling in affairs that were best left undisturbed. One fateful evening, as shadows lengthened and the world outside seemed to hold its breath, Michael's life took a drastic turn. In the midst of his investigation, he was ambushed, knocked unconscious in a swift and brutal attack. When he finally came to, disoriented and in pain, he found himself bound to a chair in a dimly lit, windowless room. The cold, unyielding metal of the restraints bit into his wrists, a stark reminder of his vulnerability. His heart pounded in his chest, a mix of adrenaline and the dawning realization that he had fallen into a trap of his own making. The door creaked open, and in walked Damian, his presence radiating authority and menace. The look in Damian's eyes was devoid of pity, a cold, calculated fury that promised retribution. Standing before Michael, Damian's voice was calm yet seething with barely contained anger. "You must pay the price," he declared. Each word was a verdict, a sentence that foretold of a fate sealed by Michael's own actions. Despite the dire situation, Michael's defiant spirit refused to yield. Even as the weight of betrayal and the consequences of his decisions pressed upon him, there was an inner conviction that had carried him this far. He believed that Victor, his mentor and supposed savior, would come through in the end. Michael's mind raced back to every time Victor had guided him through treacherous waters, every instance where Victor's calculated risks had led to victory. In that moment, even as the reality of his captivity threatened to overwhelm him, Michael clung to the belief that rescue was imminent. But doubts began to creep in as Michael recalled the subtle nuances of Victor's behavior in recent days. The excitement and trust that once defined their relationship now seemed tainted by a cold indifference. When news of Michael's disappearance eventually reached Victor, there was no outcry. No frantic search or display of concern. Instead, Victor's reaction was as measured and detached as ever, leaving Michael to question if he had ever truly mattered to him at all. The seed of betrayal had blossomed into a bitter irony. Michael had sacrificed his very being on the altar of loyalty, only to be left to face the consequences of a deception he could never have anticipated. As Michael's eyes met those of Damian, he could see a flicker of something unspoken in the other man's gaze, a twisted satisfaction, perhaps, or the thrill of seeing a rival humbled. It was a moment laden with the weight of unspoken histories and betrayals, a juncture where the lines between friend and foe blurred into a tangled web of conflicting loyalties. Michael's mind whirled as he grappled with the realization that his unwavering faith had been nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The trust he had placed in Victor, the belief that every sacrifice was leading him to a greater good, now seemed like a cruel joke played by fate. In the dark, oppressive silence of that room, Michael was forced to confront the harsh truths about his own ambitions and the treachery that had been lurking behind every decision. His journey, once marked by confident strides and unyielding resolve, had led him to a precipice from which there was no easy return. With each passing moment, the shadows around him grew darker, and the echoes of his own heartbeat seemed to mock the very idea of trust and loyalty. The narrative of Michael's life had always been one of struggle and triumph, a tale of battles fought both within and without. Yet now, as he sat tied to that cold chair, he was compelled to reconsider everything he had believed in. The very people he had trusted, the figures who had promised to guide him toward glory, had instead used his fervor to further their own agendas. In the grand scheme of things, Michael's plight was a tragic reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous traps are not laid by enemies visible to the eye, but by those who wear the mask of a friend. Even as Damian's ominous words echoed in the room, Michael's inner resolve began to crystallize. The spark of defiance, though battered and bruised, still flickered within him. His mind raced with memories of past victories, of battles won against insurmountable odds, and of the fierce spirit that had always defined him. With every fiber of his being, he vowed that this betrayal would not be the end. Instead, it would be the catalyst for a transformation, a reckoning that would force him to rise from the ashes of deception and reclaim control over his destiny. The stakes were now higher than ever. Michael understood that the path to redemption would be fraught with peril, and that every step forward would be a battle against not only his enemies but also the remnants of the trust he had once placed so blindly in Victor. The betrayal by his mentor was a bitter pill to swallow, yet it also served as a crucible that would either forge a new, stronger version of himself or shatter him completely. In the moments that followed, as the weight of impending retribution settled over him, Michael's thoughts turned inward. He questioned the nature of loyalty, the cost of blind faith, and the price one pays when the line between friend and foe becomes indistinguishable. The betrayal was not just a personal failure, it was a stark commentary on the corrupting influence of power and the devastating consequences of manipulation. Michael's internal struggle was emblematic of a larger, more universal truth. In the ruthless game of power and deceit, the only certainty is that every action has its consequence. The narrative of Michael's entrapment would soon ripple outwards, affecting not only his own fate but the intricate network of relationships and rivalries that defined their world. With each unfolding moment, it became clear that the trap was not merely a test of strength, but a crucible designed to expose the fragility of trust and the brutal cost of ambition. Michael's journey from a man who trusted implicitly to one who now eyed every shadow with suspicion was just beginning, a transformation that would reshape his destiny and forever alter the balance of Power in a realm where loyalty was a currency and betrayal was the ultimate gamble. In that cold, dimly lit room, with the weight of his past mistakes bearing down upon him, Michael made a silent promise to himself. No matter what lay ahead, be it the wrath of Damian, the indifference of Victor, or the formidable forces aligned against him, he would not succumb to despair. Instead, he would harness the pain of betrayal, using it as fuel to forge a new path forward. The journey would be arduous, fraught with uncertainty and danger. But Michael was determined to reclaim his narrative, to redefine what it meant to be strong and to trust once again. Thus, as the darkness enveloped him and the echoes of Damian's ultimatum faded into the background, Michael began to plot his escape, not just from the physical bonds that held him, but from the web of deceit that had entangled his very soul. His story was far from over. In fact, it was only at its most critical juncture. The next chapter would test every ounce of his resilience and force him to confront not only the external enemies that lurked in the shadows but also the internal demons that had been awakened by betrayal. The path ahead was uncertain, but one truth remained unshakable: Michael was no longer the man who had blindly trusted Victor's word. The betrayal had awakened a new sense of self, a burning desire for retribution and redemption that would drive him to defy every expectation and reclaim the control he had lost. In the relentless pursuit of justice and in the heart of darkness where deceit reigned supreme, Michael resolved to rise, to fight back against the betrayal, and to ultimately redefine the meaning of loyalty in a world where trust was the most dangerous game of all. Michael's world had already crumbled into chaos, but the events that followed only deepened the betrayal and left him reeling in despair. In the aftermath of his capture, as Damian's chilling ultimatum echoed in the cold, dim confines of his prison, Michael's fate now hung by a thread that his mentor, Victor, seemed all too willing to let unravel. Victor's indifference was both shocking and infuriating. He maintained a calm, almost detached demeanor, convinced that Michael's resourcefulness and innate survival instinct would allow him to extricate himself from the deadly predicament. To Victor, Michael was simply a loyal operative, a tool engineered to execute orders without question, whose escape was not only expected but taken for granted. This reckless confidence in Michael's ability to overcome adversity was unfathomable to those who had witnessed the storm of betrayal swirling around him. How could Victor assume that Michael, battered by the consequences of his blind loyalty, would simply slip away from his dire situation and return home unscathed? Such a thought was not only terrifying, it was a gross underestimation of the peril Michael now faced. The stakes escalated dramatically when Damian, unable to conceal his mounting frustration and anger, issued a stark demand. In a voice that brooked no argument, Damian ordered Victor to cough up $2 million in ransom, a sum that was intended to secure Michael's release. The threat was unambiguous: without the money, Michael's life would be forfeit. This ultimatum laid bare the harsh reality of the world Michael had once believed he ruled through his allegiance to Victor. Instead of a bond of mutual respect and loyalty, he was now caught in a web of cold calculations and merciless transactions. Yet, true to his nature, Victor refused to budge. His response was devoid of any genuine concern or empathy. It was the voice of a man who saw Michael not as a human being, but as a mere expendable asset, a hunting dog whose worth was measured solely by his ability to fetch results. The refusal stung like a physical blow. Lauren, who had long been a guardian of truth and a voice of reason amidst the swirling chaos, could no longer contain her outrage. Driven by a mix of desperation and righteous indignation, she rushed to Victor's opulent mansion, her shouts echoing through the corridors as she confronted the man who had betrayed Michael's trust so callously. In the grand, imposing halls of Victor's home, Lauren's furious cries shattered the veneer of sophistication and calm that Victor had so meticulously cultivated. "How can you be so indifferent?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Michael did everything for you. He risked his life, his reputation, everything, and now you treat him like nothing more than a disposable tool. A dog meant for the hunt." Her words, raw and unfiltered, cut through the silence like a knife, exposing the stark inhumanity of Victor's worldview. Back in the shadows of his grim cell, Michael bore the weight of this betrayal in silence. Each beat of his heart echoed with the pain of unreciprocated loyalty. Each passing moment a reminder that he had given everything for a cause he now realized was built on deception. His mind wandered through the labyrinth of memories, moments of fervent determination, acts of unwavering service, and the hope that each sacrifice would one day be met with gratitude. Instead, he found himself trapped in a cruel paradox. The very trust that had driven him to confront impossible odds now rendered him utterly defenseless. As he sat bound to the unforgiving chair, Michael's thoughts turned inward. He grappled with a painful realization: his identity, forged in the fires of ambition and loyalty, had been shattered by the very people he had believed in. The humbling truth was undeniable: despite all he had done, he was regarded merely as a hunting dog, a pawn to be sacrificed when his usefulness had expired. It was a revelation so bitter and so utterly devoid of fairness that it left a deep scar on his soul. Yet, within the depths of despair, a flicker of defiance began to kindle. The injustice of his treatment, the cruelty of a mentor who saw loyalty as a commodity rather than a bond, stirred something long dormant within him, a resolve to reclaim not only his freedom but also his dignity. Michael's silent suffering was no longer a mark of his submission. It was the crucible in which a renewed determination was being forged. Each moment of humiliation, every drop of bitter betrayal, was transforming him into a man who would not be broken by treachery. In the precarious balance between life and death, Michael vowed that his ordeal would not be his final chapter. Even as Damian's ominous threats loomed and Victor's icy indifference reigned, Michael's inner voice grew louder, urging him to rise above the darkness. The harsh reality was clear: the world he had known was irrevocably changed, and with it, the very nature of trust and loyalty had been redefined. In this brutal landscape, alliances were transient, and survival depended on a keen awareness of betrayal. The unfolding drama was far from a simple tale of good versus evil. It was a complex tapestry of intertwined loyalties, where the lines between friend and foe blurred into a murky continuum of ambition, power, and deception. Michael's personal journey, marked by moments of heroic valor and devastating betrayal, became emblematic of a larger truth about the world he inhabited, a world where the price of loyalty was steep, and the cost of trust could be measured in blood and shattered dreams. Victor's callous dismissal of Michael's plight was not merely a personal failing, it was a reflection of a deeply ingrained philosophy that valued results over relationships. In his mind, Michael's escape from the clutches of danger was not just a possibility, it was an inevitability. This blind faith in Michael's invincibility was not born of compassion or camaraderie, but of a cold calculation that saw every individual as replaceable. It was this very calculation that had led to the current crisis, where a man who had risked everything for his cause was now left to languish in the grip of betrayal. Meanwhile, Lauren's impassioned confrontation with Victor served as a stark reminder of the human cost of such ruthless pragmatism. Her words resonated with the pain of someone who had seen too many lives upended by the whims of power. She pleaded for a sense of decency, a recognition that beneath the armor of duty and loyalty lay human beings with hearts capable of love, honor, and sacrifice. Her protest was not just for Michael. It was for every soul caught in the relentless gears of a merciless system that valued profit and power above all else. For Michael, the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. The looming threat of death, the physical and emotional scars of betrayal, and the stark realization that he had been expendable all along converged into a single, searing determination. In the depths of his despair, he resolved that his suffering would not be in vain. With every ounce of strength that remained, he began to formulate a plan, a risky, desperate gambit to escape his confines and reclaim control of his destiny. This transformation was as inevitable as it was painful. Michael's inner resolve, once stifled by the weight of blind loyalty, now surged forth with a newfound clarity. He would no longer be a mere instrument of Victor's ambition. Nor would he be reduced to a pawn in Damian's ruthless game. Instead, he would harness the betrayal, using it as the catalyst for a metamorphosis that would redefine who he was and what he stood for. No longer would he allow himself to be dehumanized, treated as nothing more than a disposable asset in the pursuit of power. In the silent moments of reflection, as the harsh reality of his situation sank in, Michael's mind raced with the possibilities of revenge and redemption. The betrayal that had once left him numb now ignited a fervor, a blazing determination to confront those who had wronged him and to carve out a future where he was the master of his own fate. Every plan he formulated, every risk he calculated, was fueled by the desire to prove that he was more than the sum of his sacrifices and that his loyalty, though betrayed, still held a value far beyond the shallow metrics of power. Thus, in the oppressive darkness of that bleak room, as the threat of imminent death loomed and the echoes of Lauren's impassioned outburst resonated in the distance, Michael embraced his destiny. He was no longer the man who had blindly trusted Victor's promises or meekly endured the indignities thrust upon him. Instead, he was a man transformed.